Touching down at a Kurdish base in North Iraq, coalition special forces arrived to provide tactical training. Just a few years ago, this base was full of Americans. But now, like others across Iraq, it's been handed back to local forces. This is what the foreign troop presence in Iraq now looks like: training, equipping, advising. No combat troops has become the top line in efforts to walk the diplomatic tightrope over tensions that US troops still remain in Iraq 18 years after the invasion. Earlier this year, the American military completed an agreed reduction to 2,500 troops countrywide. Now, they're in talks to withdraw altogether. Their stated mission is to defeat ISIS. While the group no longer has any territory, their scattered remnants are still a threat. What do you think would happen right now if there was a full drawdown?
The definite risk would be the ISIS resurgence, potentially. Again, the enabling capability that the coalition provides is really essential to the Iraqi security forces and the Kurdish security forces.
Colonel David Williams is the chief coalition liaison with Kurdish forces in the north. The coalition has provided intensive training for years to the Peshmerga, the Kurdish security forces, equipping them with high-level military gear and, some say, helping them turn a mountain militia into a well-honed and modern fighting force. They do the same for the Iraqi army. The country's top counter-terrorism force was founded by the US Special Forces, and multiple branches of the security forces have been trained by them. While the pandemic ended in-person training, the regular equipment handouts continue. The Iraqi government says the country's armed forces, who were swiftly overpowered when ISIS swept through much of Iraq in 2014, are now ready to fight the country's multiple security threats alone. Others aren't so sure.
Hello, sir. How are
Peshmerga General Sirwan Barzani has worked hand-in-hand with the coalition for years. He says local forces couldn't manage in a year what foreign forces can do in a few days.
The Iraqi government has now requested a full withdrawal of those forces here. How do you feel that will affect the situation in wider Iraq?
We need the coalition. We need them, and if they will leave, we will face two big problems with this terrorism, really.
As for the ongoing territorial dispute between Iraqi Kurdistan and the federal government, the widely held feeling among Kurds that they deserve more support in return for fighting ISIS hasn't gone away. For the Kurdish forces in the north, who see the Americans as their strongest allies, a complete drawdown would be the worst-case scenario.
So you do feel there's been enough effort from your allies?
No, of course not enough. They give support, but it's not enough.
After ISIS lost its territorial control, many of the remaining fighters scattered and went to ground across Iraq, taking their ideology with them. The country's hostile internal politics haven't made tackling that any easier. The territorial squabbles have created ungoverned areas that fleeing insurgents have taken advantage of. Colonel Nawrouza has fought with the Peshmerga for 3 decades. Since 2018, he's watched over this peak in the mountains near Mahmoud, south of the Kurdish capital Erbil.
These bases mark the end of Peshmerga territory. Over there by the villages is the Iraqi army. In between, in the mountains, is ISIS, where they hide themselves.
He and his men watch from here as Iraqi forces, supported by coalition air power and intelligence, do their best to root them out. A recent 2-week campaign, Operation Ready Lion, targeted this area, killing at least 30 insurgents and destroying over 100 hideouts. These raids and others like them are carefully planned and coordinated here at the Baghdad intelligence headquarters known as the Shark Tank.
They run all the ISR, the drones, for surveillance. They run strikes and intelligence. A lot of the strike requests, a lot of times initiate with the partner. So the partner comes to us and says, we have this intel, can you strike it?
Brigadier General Ryan Rideout heads up the coalition's military advisor group in Iraq. He says the partnership of foreign air power followed by local boots on the ground is now well practiced.
Right, so if we bomb at night, they will come the next day and do a ground clearance. With the Makhmur operation, it was really about a sustained operation over time that just kind of broke the backs of those forces hiding in there. So they literally had just run out of food, run out of water.
The combined forces here say that despite dozens of ongoing attacks, the fight against ISIS is nearing its end. But even as one threat reduces, an even more unpredictable one has emerged. This year has seen dozens of rocket attacks at bases across Iraq, causing significant damage and killing 10 US contractors and locals caught in the crossfire. The bases are covered with bomb shelters and blast walls everywhere you turn. The troops are well drilled in how to protect themselves inside their bases rather than out in the field. So far, no American troops have been killed in the attacks. The White House has warned that if even one were, that could mark a major escalation. Meanwhile, all they can do is stay alert.
So this is where you'd come after, depending where you are, and wait for the all clear.
We've ended up spending rather a lot of time in bunkers like these. In the week we spent with US forces here, there were no fewer than 6 threats confirmed serious enough to sound alarms at bases with a US presence across the country. And at least 3 of those resulted in actual strikes.
It's not just rockets they have to contend with now, but drones rigged with explosives, which can be much harder to track and protect against. Private Dawson had been here just a month when the first drone attack hit his base in Erbil.
It's kind of one of those like fight or flight thing, one of those moments that just kind of kicks into your head. And that was the fastest I've ever run in my entire life. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I mean, I was Forrest Gump, just gone.
They believe they're being targeted by elements of the fragmented local Shia militias, known as the Hashid Shabi or Popular Mobilization Forces, who since America's assassination of Iran's top military commander Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad 18 months ago, have been pushing to get them off Iraqi soil. And it's not just bases being attacked. Military convoys bring vehicles, weapons and equipment over land to hand over to local forces. A lot of that divestment, as it's called, happens here at Ain al-Assad Air Base in Anbar.
So how much have you given so far this year?
So far this year, since January, we have given over $200 million of assets.
Improvised explosive devices, gun attacks and even rocket fire have been used to target the equipment and damage it en route. But the people getting hurt in these attacks aren't Americans.
It's Iraqi drivers with their own trucks, so Iraqi trucks.
So although they're actually seen as US convoys and US equipment, it's Iraqi people who are being attacked when they're transporting that equipment to you?
Correct. So this is one of the vehicles that we received that was hit by an IED en route. Shot across the motor and it damaged the backboard. And you can see most of the actual damage on the inside as it shred through everything.
Iraq's Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khadimi requested a formal timeline for foreign troop withdrawal earlier this year after militia leaders issued an ultimatum. In the run-up to an election planned this October, some fear their presence will become even more of a political playing card. It's a complex legacy. The military shies away from politics, but there are few images more politically loaded in Iraq than an American soldier. Particularly here in Fallujah, scene of some of the deadliest battles in the mid-2000s, and an emblem of the cruelest repercussions of the conflict. Today, families drink coffee by the river while their children play in safety nearby. But the memory lingers. Muhannad al-Hadi, who was just 16 at the time, remembers watching his little brother killed when he says US forces opened fire on protesters.
Our house was facing the school where the American forces were. Their response was to open fire, relentless and aimless open fire on the citizens and whoever lived near the school. The American forces shot him twice, a bullet to the hand and another one to the chest. 2 bullets.
He watched as 12-year-old Abed bled to death slowly in front of his home. They weren't allowed to collect the bodies for hours. His mother died weeks later, he believes, of a broken heart. After that, Muhannad had to raise his remaining 5 siblings alone. But others fear a return to Iraq's darkest days as a lawless security vacuum if the US forces leave for good. Ra'ed Jomaili is the same age as al-Hadi. In 2006, his father was kidnapped by al-Qaeda at a fake checkpoint. He says he was rescued when US forces stormed their hideout 2 weeks later.
That's why we want American forces to be present in all Iraqi provinces, so we can get rid of all this terrorism.
His father was kidnapped again 3 years ago by a local militia. This time, there were no foreign forces to turn to in the area. He believes if there had been, his father, who hasn't been seen since, might still be with him. Those who want the foreign troops out say ISIS is long gone. Those who want them to stay say the threat is too real to be abandoned just yet.
So US forces here, their presence is not going anywhere.
As long as there's an invitation, I don't think what the US wants is a complete departure of all forces. The Iraqis want a normalized military-to-military type relationship.
But is that relationship possible when you've got militias who many people say have a heavy representation in the Iraqi government you're working with? sending rockets and drones with explosives into your bases?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. We are not here to be in conflict with the militias. And if they create that situation, we're gonna have to make a choice. It's not what the Iraqis want. The Iraqis being the ones that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. There's certainly, I think, a portion of Iraqis that do want that, and that's the problem.
Amid the global power play, the fragile increase in security Iraqis currently enjoy is at stake.
You already have a bad economy, a lot of actors playing in this environment. Very easily could the environment deteriorate back to a situation where ISIS could come back. Disenfranchised people who are angry is a recipe for a quick return of ISIS.
Others, though, argue their very presence here is the touch paper that will ignite further conflict. As tensions continue to escalate, the time for a choice may soon come.